Fantastic. Well, hello everyone. Welcome to this FDP Expanded Clearinghouse webinar. My name's Julie Thatcher. I'm the Director of Sponsored Projects at ISB in Seattle and a member of the Expanded Clearinghouse Steering Committee. And today I have the pleasure of moderating. Our session will provide an overview and some general instructions for creating and maintaining an institutional profile in the Expanded Clearinghouse. Our lead presenter is Expanded Clearinghouse Steering Committee Co-Chair Pamela Webb, the Vice President for Research Administration at the University of Minnesota. And Pamela is assisted today by Steering Committee member and our Help Desk Administrator, Courtney Swaney, Associate Director in the Office of Sponsored Projects at the University of Texas at Austin. Today's session participants include representatives from the first non-FDP member cohort of institutions that have declared their intention to join the clearinghouse. We planned an interactive session where your questions are welcome. The first portion of the presentation will be an orientation and overview. I'll share your questions throughout the session as appropriate and timely, and everyone will have the opportunity to unmute and ask questions after the formal presentation. And finally, we want you to know that this Zoom session is being recorded and will be available on the Help tab of the Expanded Clearinghouse site. So now, without further ado, please let me introduce Pamela and Courtney.
Thank you, Julie. First, we want to take a minute to let you know how really excited we are to be expanding the Expanded Clearinghouse to non-FDP members. We're really hoping that you're going to appreciate and enjoy the same reduction of administrative burden in the subrecipient entity monitoring process that's been widely reported by the FDP members before you. You're the next experimental cohort, and we hope in this webinar to provide you as much information as possible to ensure your successful enrollment and maintenance. Because really, at the end of the day, the clearinghouse is only as powerful as the data that we all put in it. At this point, all the participant organizations on this Zoom call have committed to joining the clearinghouse, and you may have already begun completing your organizational worksheet. In today's webinar, we plan to provide a brief overview of the system and enrollment process, and we're going to focus our attention on some of the questions we're fielding more frequently on the help desk. As Julie mentioned, please go ahead and use the chat feature for any questions or clarifications as we go along. We'll take your questions at the end of each segment here. And remember, we're also going to be open for questions and answers after the overview portion of this. So we'll go ahead and get started first with the overview of the clearinghouse. Now, you need to remember that this is currently a publicly available website that hosts all the FDP members' online organizational profiles. There's about 207 up there now. The website can be located at fdpeclearinghouse.org, and if you look on your screen, you'll see that at the top. As you know, these profiles replace the paper-based subrecipient commitment forms that we used to use, and they're intended to include all of the entity or organizational level information that a pass-through entity needs when it is issuing a subaward. We encourage, though, that all institutions, and that actually includes our federal and non-federal funders as well, to utilize the wealth of the information on the online Expanded Clearinghouse, and that can happen whether they're members of the clearinghouse or not. That means for you that once your profile's been added, you should feel free to welcome your pass-through entities to view your profile online, even if they're not themselves members of the clearinghouse. So the way you do this is all published profiles can be accessed by clicking on participating organizations. And remember, these are publicly available without anyone needing a login to get into the system. So Courtney's going to navigate here to a profile, and she's going to show you a sample as we review the type of data that's available. You can quickly, briefly go through every tab and just take a look at what kind of data are in each tab. But we're going to go through these here in a minute. In general, the data included on all the published profiles have been certified correct, by an applicable organizational official, and they include data about the entity's most recent single audit, their F&A and fringe benefit rates, and information about suspension and debarment, PHS financial conflict of interest, federal-wide assurance number, other compliance-related information, and basically a whole wide variety of federal codes and institutional contact information that are commonly needed for the various types of subawards that we all do. You're going to note that a banner at the very top of the profile will indicate whether the organization is an FDP member organization or a non-FDP member organization. Julie, do we have any questions?
Not so far. You can keep going.
Okay, then we're going to go ahead and we're going to start by creating users. So let's start by showing you first how you add your organization and begin to manage those users. At this point, all participating organizations have already identified their primary user and that person's contact information. The primary user should have yesterday received login credentials from fdpechelp@gmail.com, and you're going to use that information to initiate your profile. So first you want to successfully navigate to the FDP Expanded Clearinghouse site. You see the URL there. And then log into the system with your email address and the password that you received. Once you're logged in, you may see your organization already listed on the My Dashboard page because it was created by the help desk. And you can just go ahead and click on your organization name to open your draft profile. But if you don't see your organization there, go ahead and click on Add Organization and enter the full legal name of your organization. And then also enter your common name. Now we want you to think really carefully about your common name because that's the name under which you're going to be searchable and others are going to find your profile. For example, if you enter University of California, Los Angeles, and people coming in are looking for you under UCLA, they're not going to find your profile. It is fine, though, if you want to include your full name or your common name that you go by, and then add a nickname at the end, such as adding UCLA in parentheses after you first write out University of California, Los Angeles. The next thing you're going to do is enter your EIN number. A really helpful feature in the Clearinghouse is the pre-formatted data fields throughout the profile. That's meant to guide you to enter standardized data. So just by way of example, for the EIN number, you're going to see 2 characters, a dash, and then a series of additional numbers. Next is the DUNS number, where you're also going to see a predetermined number of characters. It's really critical that your DUNS number match exactly what's listed in your SAM.gov profile. And frankly, this field is going to be validated by a Clearinghouse Steering Committee reviewer prior to letting your profile go live. So if you do happen to get it wrong, we're going to find it and we're going to come back to you and ask you to fix it.
So like log in with the login.
Can I interrupt for a moment? Someone is unmuted and I'm requesting once again that everybody mute if you're calling in from your phone, mute your phone if you have that capability, otherwise mute using Zoom's features. Thank you.
Once you've got your data all entered here, you're going to go ahead and click the Save button. And then you're going to see the basic profile screen. There you go. So next, let's go ahead and add and manage users. And the way you do that is you click on the Manage Users button. Now, I want to make sure people understand users are not the same as your institutional contacts, which we're going to discuss in a minute about how you create your profile. On this user screen, you're going to see the name of the person who is set up with some default rights. You click Edit to see the default user manager and profile editor roles. You can have more than one profile editor if you wish. There's also a role for a profile certifier, and that's the person who's going to provide assurance of the accuracy of your data before it's submitted to FDP. Most typically, this person is an authorized organizational representative at your institution. It's perfectly fine if you want to have the person who is your user manager also hold a profile editor role, and they could also hold the profile certifier role. The only restriction here is there can only be one profile certifier per institution. Please make sure and add that person's title, and once added, the information will be stored, so you'll only have to enter it one time. There's also a really nice email feature. There's a generic central email option in addition to the personal email address. But what I mean by generic email is something like grantsoffice@institution.org. This generic email will be the default if you have it entered, but the steering committee reviewers will be able to see behind the scenes who the person actually is, should the profile certifier need to be contacted personally and directly. Now, once you go ahead and click Save, you're going to see them on the user list. Next, click Add Users to enter additional users as applicable. You'll be asked to enter an email address and click Next to enter the name, title, and roles. Again, please note if the person has already been entered in the clearinghouse, this information is going to automatically pre-populate. Once a user account is created and saved, the system will automatically send that person an email with a password. If your authorized profile certifier is going to be someone other than yourself, it's a good idea to let them know you've set up an account for them and that they should log in to familiarize themselves with the system. That's going to help and ensure that they're ready to review the profile once it's submitted to them. Julie, do we have any questions?
No questions yet. Thanks.
Okay. All right, let's get into the meat of it. Let's go ahead and complete our institutional profile.
Okay, I'm going back to my test, so that way it's a little bit more clear.
Okay.
Okay, we're ready.
Okay. Now, these instructions that I'm about to give you are going to be most useful to users assigned the primary contact or the profile editor role at their institution, because these are the roles that are going to have the necessary access to create the institutional profile as we're about to do here. So your institutional profile is accessed through My Dashboard and then by the organization name. To edit a profile, go ahead and click on Open Draft. When you're editing a profile, the area outside the profile is dark and the data fields are editable. You'll know that you're editing when you see the editing bar near the top of the screen. In the edit mode, you're going to see help text included below the name of the data field. Just by way of example, for congressional district, the help text says sample format WA-007 can be found in SAM. Now, in some cases, the data field itself shows the format in which to enter the information like we talked about with the EIN and DUNS numbers. Another example of that is congressional district, because it shows the data field is supposed to have 2 letters, a dash, and 3 numbers. If the number normally contains dashes, the user doesn't have to enter those dashes because it's pre-formatted. Now, once that individual data field is completed, you can hit either the Tab or the Enter key on your keyboard to go ahead and move to the next field. You're going to notice that a green Saved button appears, indicating that the information has been saved. That means you don't have to save on each individual page. It saves on a field-by-field basis. When all data fields on a given tab are complete, you'll be able to click on Next at the bottom of the page to go ahead and move over to the next tab. One interesting thing, though, that you should know right away is you don't have to enter the data in the same order in which the tabs appear. You can jump from tab to tab if you want to and enter information on any tab that you wish. So to give a sense of this, now there's 4 different ways that data gets entered into the clearinghouse, and we want to make sure you're aware of all 4 of those. The first and the most common is you just type it in because it's a data entry field. In some cases, there are drop-down lists, and you need to pick from one of the options there. You can also copy and paste in hyperlinks on certain fields, and you could upload documentation. For example, you could upload a read agreement or a form that the system is asking for if you want to do that. There are a few data elements in here that are preceded by the word primary. And that's really an indicator of, please give us the data that should be used most of the time. If you have more than one possible response, enter that information used most often in the primary data field, and then go ahead and use the comments box at the bottom of that screen to enter other important information. If you do end up using the comments box, it's a really good idea to make sure that you're including a reference to which data element it goes with. One thing we've learned is, in order to avoid errors, it's really important to make sure that all expiration dates that are asked for are future dates. Because if you don't do that, a warning message is going to pop up and it'll stop you from entering that. Also, where possible, individual data fields indicate that format. So if your information doesn't conform to that format, or if you haven't put anything in that field, the user's not going to be able to go ahead and submit that profile to the authorized profile certifier. Really what's going on is all fields either have to be completed with data, or one of the drop-down boxes offered, or have not applicable selected, if that's an allowed response for that particular question. If you have errors, they're going to show up on the authorization tab, so you'll know ahead of time if that's going to be an issue for you. The other thing is, if you end up needing to change any of your responses, there's a revalidate button available on the authorizations tab, so you can check your work that way. So on most of the tabs, specifically General Information tab, Registration and IDs, Certifications, Audits, Assurances, an optional comments box appears where you can enter the information, as I said before, about any data element on that field. An example of this might be a case where your annual audit is late and you want to tell people that you know it's late and that's going to be updated as soon as possible. Those fields are going to be visible to anybody that's viewing your profile. On the Contacts tab is a list of contacts for the organization. Enter contact. Click the Add button on the right side of the screen, and you're going to be prompted to enter an email address for the contact. Then click on Next. If the contact is brand new to the system, you're going to again be asked to enter their first name, last name, and title. But if they're already in the system somewhere, then that information is going to pre-populate and automatically appear. You also, for each contact, get that same nice option to have that optional display email field entered if that's applicable for that particular contact. This option, we've made that option available because many offices use generic central email addresses to receive correspondence, like preaward@university.edu. And so we want to make sure that you have that option for these types of contacts. Now, I think we've said before that it's important to get the distinction between users and contacts. If you enter somebody in the Contacts tab, you're not creating an automatic user account for that person. Contacts are people that readers of your profile may wish to contact if they have a question about a named topic at your organization. For example, say about FAFATA. Users, by contrast, are the people who have doer roles in the clearinghouse itself. So those are a profile editor, profile certifier, that type of person. You'll want to remember that users are entered separately through that Manage Users button. And again, you can learn more about managing users by reviewing that material we went through previously.
Now, Pamela, can I interject? I wanted to make it clear that for the Manage Users, if you look at my screen right now, there's no authorized profile certifier. And in order to add that person on this screen, you have to edit on the Manage Users screen. And so once I do that, I'm gonna give it to myself and save. Go back to the profile. You'll now see that I have a name there. So that's the only way to update that particular field on the contacts page.
The audit.
The other thing that I wanted to mention is that when you edit a contact, rather than if I wanted to change the contact, you need to make sure and click change versus just edit and put somebody else's name in. That will cause some problems later down the line when we publish the profile.
So Courtney, if you changing to a whole different person, you use the change contact.
Correct.
You're editing, perhaps you got a promotion and we need to edit you to promote you. That's when
Sure.
we use edit contact. Is that right?
That's correct, except I'm getting, it froze up my screen. Hold on.
Well, while she's doing that, I'm just going to tell people that we're asking everybody to be mindful to keep your contact fields up to date. And this usually is not up to date in the case where you have job transitions or title changes. So when you do change key roles at your institution, please make sure that your profile editor remembers to go in and update your profile. And the reason that that's important is we send notifications out from the system. For example, when certain dates in your profile have expired or they're about to expire, and we want to make sure they actually get to someone and they get to the right person. And so you're keeping your information current helps us do that effectively. So I'll let Courtney go ahead and get the profile back up here, because we want to show you how to print also.
Okay.
And the really nice thing is you can print either from a draft or you can print from a published profile, either one. And we'll show you how to do that once the screen is able to get back up.
We do have a question too, so I'll pose this question that was just asked in the chat. The question is, for the audit contact, the person to list as audit contact, would that be the person responsible for the single audit or the person to contact for any audit?
The best thing would be for any audit. So who's the person at your institution that you would like contacted in the event there's an audit question? I think as a practical matter, most people do use their single audit contact, because if you think about it, if there's a question about an audit, what audit are we actually reviewing as members of the clearinghouse? Well, we're reviewing your single audit. So it's totally an institutional choice, but you may find it most helpful to actually use your single audit contact for that. Okay. So we're just gonna, Courtney's gonna show you how to print. Now
Right.
first we're gonna print from draft. So you can,
So here,
yep. So you're gonna select that preview draft button, and then you get a print button. And then you can pick whether you wanna print the profile to PDF or you want to send it to a printer. And you can see her doing that there. Now, if you're in a published profile already, you can also print. And it's pretty close to the same. Instead of preview draft, you just get the print button, and then you can go ahead and do the same thing. And remember, you can print either your profile, or if you need to print another organization's profile, you can do that too.
okay.
So Julie, if we don't have any other questions, I'll move forward to how to certify your profile.
Please do.
Okay. So now that your profile is complete, we're going to demonstrate what occurs when you're ready to submit it for certification. Now, the first thing is certification by your authorized profile certifier is the last institutional step that you need to go through before the FDP is able to review and publish your profile in the clearinghouse. So once your profile is complete, go to the authorizations tab. And on the authorizations tab, after ensuring that any errors have been addressed, select submit for certification. This is going to send an email notification to your authorized profile certifier that the profile is ready to be reviewed. And the profile status at this point is submitted. Then your authorized profile certifier can log into the system. And if it's somebody, again, other than the profile editor, it's helpful that they already have familiarized themselves with the clearinghouse by the time they do this for the first point. The certifier needs to navigate through all of the tabs and ensure the information is accurate. And then once they're content that all the information is just right, they should go to the authorizations tab. Now here, the certifier is going to see a copy of the profile participation agreement with the expectations for your institutions outlined. Now this is the exact same participation agreement that you already saw when your institution chose to become a member of the cohort. So the certifier selects accept and continue, and then once selected, a new screen is going to open. When you go ahead and select submit to FDP, it's going to send a message to the Clearinghouse Steering Committee reviewer that your profile is ready for review. In most cases, the reviewers are able to get back and review your profile within 2 to 3 working days. And so you should hear pretty soon if everything is okay. What's going to happen in the intervening period is the assigned reviewer is going to go through and review and validate certain elements of the profile data. We're going to, for example, check that all the hyperlinks work and all the attachments actually open the right kind of file, and that the institutional name on the DUNS number is the same as the legal name of the institution. Once the reviewer has confirmed that everything is correct, they'll publish a profile. If there are errors, an email will be sent to the profile editor asking for changes. This is done by the FDP reviewer typing a note in the comments section and then returning the profile. If there aren't any errors, the FDP reviewer will simply approve the profile. Once it's approved, the profile status in the system shows as published, and it'll be immediately publicly available in the FDP Clearinghouse under the participating organizations section. Julie, do we have any questions?
No, we don't. No new questions.
Okay. Well, there's one more thing we need to cover with you before we open it up for general Q&A, and that is we need to talk to you about how you update your profile. We want to remind you how important and how critical it is that you maintain your profile with current information. And this is particularly true for things like your annual audit information, your SAM.gov registration dates, and your contacts. And so we're going to take you just a few more moments to walk you through the steps to do that and to show you how you resubmit your profile so that those updates will also appear in the clearinghouse. Now first, in order to update your already published profile, the organizational owner or profile editor needs to log into the system and select the published profile under the My Dashboards tab. This is going to open a new draft of the profile. You should note that the existing published profile remains visible to the public until the updated profile is approved by the authorized profile certifier and published by the FDP reviewer. So there's no period of time where there's nothing up there once you've published the first time. After you've updated the relevant information, and again, you can skip to whatever tab you need to in order to enter the updated information, go to the Authorizations tab and select Submit for Certification. This is going to send an email, again, to the authorized profile certifier and to let them know that there's something ready to be reviewed and an update is there, and the profile status at that point is submitted. They should go in, log in, review the profile, ensure the updated information is accurate, and then go to the Authorizations tab. Again, like they did the first time, they're going to click the button that says Submit to FDP, and then the profile will go to the FDP administrators to review before it's published. Once the FDP reviewer has gone through the updated profile and validated the data, they'll see the published profile. They'll be able to publish, I'm sorry, the updated profile. The newly updated profile status in the system, again, is going to show published. And at that point, it's going to replace that previous published version of the profile in the clearinghouse. And when you go to participating organizations, the most recent published version is going to show up. So that's all we have in our pre-formatted comments for you. And we hope we've left now enough time for any additional questions or comments that you might have.
Pamela, we did get one more really important question.
Okay.
And that is, can I publish with incomplete information?
No, you can't. You can't, at least without entering every field. What you can do, for example, let's say your annual audit is late. That's something that happens quite frequently. You could put in last year's audit and put a note in comments section that your annual audit is late, like we talked about earlier, and that would be acceptable to go through. Although you'll probably get an email from us going, do you have any idea when you're getting that? But every field has to be completed. You can pick not applicable, however, if it's one of the questions that allows that as an option in the drop-down, for example, and later on go in and update it with more current information if you get it later. But that's going to depend on a question-by-question basis, whether that option is available to you.
Thank you. There are no other questions, but we have about 30 minutes remaining for open questions if people want to unmute their microphones. Again, you can do so by unmuting at the bottom of your screen or pressing Alt-A on your keyboard. Oh, here's another question. Can you save and come back to complete?
Yes, you can. As I talked about before, you see that green save message every time you go from field to field. So it's actually saving that field. So you can exit your profile at that point and go out of it and come back in, and you'll get back into your, do the preview draft, and you'll go right back in and be able to continue editing at that point. That's a very common thing for people to do.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that those people who've used that organizational worksheet that we sent you find that that can be really helpful because it makes sure you kind of gather all the data that you need before you actually go in and start doing your profile the first time. It can just be a fast and good way to go about it, but it isn't essential because you can do it partially and come back in and finish it later.
Okay. And then how long does it typically take? I think you mentioned up to 2 days for the FDP for the Expanded Clearinghouse reviewers to review and publish after the profile is submitted.
Yes, that's the most common is 2 to 3 working days for the reviewers to go in and check. Most of the time, I have to say it's faster than that, but that's the time frame. You know, if you can give us 3 days, and if you haven't heard from us by then, it's perfectly appropriate to send in an email to fdpechelp@gmail.com and say, hello, are you out there? And we will absolutely check on it at that point.
Okay. And then we have a question here about a best practice and whether you would recommend a best practice for uploading a rate agreement as an attachment or to enter a hyperlink for that type of information. Do you want to recommend one over the other?
Yes, I do. I would recommend the hyperlink if it's at all possible. And the reason for that is occasionally we found that people have trouble with downloading someone's file for some unknown reason. And then they come into the help desk and we have to work through it with you. So although most of the time that works fine, we virtually never have trouble with the hyperlinks. The hyperlinks are something we validate at the time we're reviewing the profile, so we know that it links directly to your rate agreement. Our best practice is, and you'll see this in the instructions, that we would like very much for you to provide a direct link to your rate agreement, as opposed to a page that has a bunch of F&A information on it, for example. And then people have to still spend time to hunt around and find where the rate agreement is. If you can click right to the rate agreement, that's the very best way to do it. Because remember, what we're trying to do here is absolutely minimize the administrative burden that it takes for people to get the information they need to be able to do appropriate subrecipient monitoring. And so the faster they can get to your good data, the better off they are.
Okay. And then Pamela, we have at least one organization that we know of that has multiple EINs and DUNS numbers. Should they enter the primary org info only, or do you want to talk a little bit about the, the relationships among an institution that has multiple DUNS?
Sure, no problem. So Courtney, if you can navigate to my profile, I think it's a good example of this. I guess we're not logged in. You'll see there that I have 4 of them. So when I go in to my dashboard, when I'm logged in, I see all 4 of these on my profile. And so our recommendation is if you have multiple campuses and they have different DUNS numbers, that you enter a profile for each one of those. We think we only have one institution like that in this cohort, but you should be familiar regardless, so you know how other people's data is organized. And it does mean then you have to rekey the information there. We do not have a clone feature in the clearinghouse, but since it only takes about an hour to fill in your profile, it shouldn't be too much of a burden if you do have to do that on a campus by campus basis. It's not necessary to do that if you're all using the same EIN and you're all using the same DUNS number. Even if you have different parts of your institution, it's perfectly fine to just go ahead and have those all consolidated. The choice is yours, but again, we recommend that you use DUNS number and EIN as a trigger for whether or not you need an additional profile or 2.
Okay, thank you. And then do you want to talk a little bit about the fee process? Is it due now, and how will people be able to pay?
Sure. So what we are expecting is anytime now, David Wright, the executive director of the FDP, will be generating invoices that will come out via email to the primary points of contact at each new joining institution. And so what you'll want to do is take that invoice and then go through whatever your normal internal payment process is to get those funds sent back to the FDP Foundation. When we're going through your profiles and getting them ready to publish, we will be checking in with David to make sure that the payment has been made. And if we have to hold your profile for payment, we'll send you an email so you know that that's the case. And then we'll go ahead and publish it as soon as we have the payment. Now the payment, $750, is for whenever you get your profile published. We want to do these by July 7th, if at all possible. And it's through August of 2020. At that point, FDP is going to be opening up for a new 6-year phase. And they're right now going through how they're going to structure their membership dues. And that's going to be membership dues both for being in FDP as a whole and the Expanded Clearinghouse. I will tell you, if you decide at that point to join the FDP, at that point, there's no additional charge for you to be in the Expanded Clearinghouse. That's just part of your FDP membership. But we do anticipate that if you choose not to become a member of FDP at that point, you'll still be able to be in the clearinghouse. We just don't know for sure at this point exactly what the fee is going to be. We're not, this is not, however, being offered on a bait and switch kind of mentality. So we're not thinking there's going to be some giant change in the way fees are structured, except perhaps if you're a multi-campus institution, because there may be a new fee structure based on profile rather than on entity.
Thank you. we do have a question about when and where can we start attending the FDP meetings or conferences?
Sure. FDP meetings are public, so you can start now joining those. The next FDP meeting will be in September. You can go on the FDP website, and there's a link to it right from the clearinghouse. And there will be the meeting dates and the meeting registration fees to join. You absolutely are free to go to every session that the FDP offers there. The only restriction is that you can't actively participate in a pilot or a demonstration or lead one of their committees unless you're a member of FDP. But you can attend everything that is offered there and just pay the registration fee.
Great, thank you. Okay, and then somebody did ask if a recorded version of the webinar will be available for viewing, and yes, the answer is we are currently recording, and we potentially hope to edit out our technical difficulties and provide you with a nice, clean, informational stream of entering and maintaining your profile. I'm going to pause for a moment to see if anybody unmuted to ask a question off of chat. But otherwise, all of our chat questions have been answered. So I want to take a moment to thank everyone who joined the webinar today. We hope you found it useful, and thank you for your patience as we got through our little technical glitch in the middle. And of course, I especially want to thank Pamela and Courtney for presenting today, and all the other Expanded Clearinghouse Steering Committee members who exert such a tremendous effort behind the scenes to maintain such a seamless system. Again, we did record the session, and it will soon be available in the Expanded Clearinghouse Help tab. If you didn't get your question answered or new questions arise as you're completing your profile, please email fdpechelp@gmail.com. And that email address Courtney is pointing out and is also all over all of our communication. Courtney is your first responder, so you can see her face now. You'll know who you're writing to. And as a reminder, we're asking everyone to submit their profile by the first part of July. We look forward to reviewing and publishing this next cohort in our continued effort to diminish subrecipient entity monitoring burden across the research community. So thank you very much for your participation. And that will conclude our webinar today. Thank you.